Hello, this is Not Too Interesting with my very interesting guest, Trippy Trooper. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
All right,
Well,
good, good, good.
I'll say we're doing all right.
Yeah, we're doing all right.
That's my personal, my pronoun type deal because I host multiple consciousnesses, and so I'm speaking for more than just myself. You know what I'm saying?
Really?
Yeah, really?
Tell me,
Huh. What specifically do you want me to tell you about that?
hmm, I suppose in a certain sense, as a Christian, I'd say we do house multiple consciences we could choose to listen to. But tell me about it from your perspective. I never heard anyone say a house multiple consciences, as in you house a different identity or personality to yourself. Tell me about that. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Well, I'll start off with relating a bit. I was raised Roman Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gone through whole bunch of Christianity as far as my life has gone, and well, our life has gone. But I'll refer to it as my too because the letter M represents certain tomic and symbolic representations of more than one consciousness from what I've studied. And so basically, like let's say it's old stuff. It's really not like anything that new. I know that the altar community is something that's new for a lot of people, right? The term neurodiverse is something that's new for some.
Mm-hmm.
Others, they identify. I guess one of the examples that I could relate to having multiple identities that are, traditionally not acknowledged as the norm. I would say the trans community and
Mm-hmm.
let's say the bisexual community also, and communities that embrace androgyny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's funny because the ideas of androgyny, well, the representation of androgyny goes so far back in history as far as like ancient gods that even predate the Christian ones, or at least when they were written about, and like gods that are hermaphroditic, and that means they have both genitals. Gods that don't engage in any type, even gods that are even beyond just like the human aspect of it, that have animal and human representation, like let's say the Egyptian gods.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been lots of like light and vague and also dead on the money, references to having more than one consciousness being represented in a human form. And also, as far that's some of the history that I could talk about, but I'll say like not just
Please.
like the I wouldn't even say mythology because that seems a bit rude. And that's like to
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, I know what the heck actually happened back then. No, we have accounts from authors that, of course, have their own personal bias and were colored by their subjective conditioning, right? And of course, maybe they tried to stay objective, but regardless, it needs to be acknowledged that their personal view contributed to what those writings were. So I one thing as far as the multiple consciousnesses goes is anyone could look into some of the esoteric books, stuff like the Kybalion, right? Stuff
Mm-hmm.
like texts on the spiritual alchemy, like the Corpus Hermeticum, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot. Rosicrucianism, Masonry, all these teachings, the lemma, I've but I have looked into and gained a bunch of self understanding from it. As far as from a philosophical perspective. So and we can apply different things and stuff. I don't want to get into too much detail because it's kind of like I'll get into whatever detail that you ask specifically, but I'm not just going to pour out every little thing about every little friend that I got kind of thing.
Can I
Unless
be
it's
honest with you?
yeah, go for it.
I am very ignorant. I want to hear what you have to say fully. Like,
Or
how does this relate to just you as a human being? Because what you just said, how you see or you relate yourself as sort of like, sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but as a vessel, you house multiple consciences. you don't consider yourself just one whole, complete being, but like a collection of beings. Is that right?
Uh, no, I disagree there with the phrasing, and maybe you're explaining it. You're explaining it, of course, like how you understand too. I say I do consider myself a complete being, and the reason that I even have taken on other consciousnesses in my vessel, as you put it, which I refer to, the vessel is in a temple, and the temple is in a temple of temples. You know,
Mm-hmm.
is how I would put it. But and that temple is in the church of the earth or whatever you want to regard to. But I would
Yeah.
say that, yeah, no, I'm complete and was like,
Mm-hmm.
fully full, just myself, being with myself, doing my life myself. And
Yeah.
then I started, feeling like there's more to me. I'm a highly sensitive individual to the point that like I instigate my own issues to derive wisdom from them later, which is something that I realized in retrospect, whereas before it was more of a reaction. Like I get into trouble and then I always figure out a way to deal with it, or like I always learn something from it, or I always, so on and so forth until I finally came to the wisdom of like, oh, I put myself through things to improve my knowledge base and to consolidate wisdom from events that are, full of trail guide pieces, like full of path markers and posts on how to find the way of ways, or like, for example, the high philosophical ideals of Jainist Taoism,
Mm-hmm.
like to get there, that I can navigate through the world without, fighting about every little thing. I can maintain myself at like a Buddhist center, I would say, as far as like levels of acceptance go, levels of realization of another, levels of recognition to any life that is on this, cohabitative path with us on this world. It's a lifelong process. And luckily there's a lot of history about it to help guide somebody. And so yeah, I embrace all his teachings of the world. I'll say that, and that led me to my friends.
All right. But question, just give me a background of the different religions you've learned and different spiritual teachings, then we'll dip on into transhumanism.
Well, I started with the Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, from there, I learned a little bit about Judaism, a little bit about Islam, a little bit about Hinduism as I was growing up, but nothing that like had me taken completely into the spiritual path as far as like following it devoutly, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I did consider it important though, those teachings, even if I didn't go, full gung ho zealot with it, I was still like, well, I see zeal in it, I see the things that bring out the spirit of someone in these teachings in, each of these different spiritual offerings that have been made by wisdom teachers of the past and the ones that have reported about them. So I was like, well, so they, integrated in my path early, but so then I, I went on a more shamanic type journey into understanding myself, like communing with plant medicines, doing substance
Mm-hmm.
assisted, let's say, sessions of like self exploration, you know, thinking about what the hell do I think about? Why do I care about this? Not
Mm-hmm.
just like what is it, and of course, oh, I'm really interested in this, like whatever the subject is, why don't I go and look into the details instead of sitting at a point of generalization, like finding my flame and like like sorting out the little tids and bits keeping me from my passions, as far as like fully comprehending what I care about, why I care about it, and what the heck I can do to help others with the stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I've learned.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Jesus-y aspect definitely showed up for me. There are points in my freaking spiritual journey that it was like straight up, wow, the teachings of Jesus, and like thank you so freaking much, and like that divine forgiveness, all the different commandments, and like how how to be such a proper, honorable, human, how to just be this unconditional love and to present it with others shamelessly and without even the slightest egoic intersection that would take me away, into a place of self-defense or, concealment, as opposed to identifying with somebody. wide open, being like, yeah, and I messed up about this too, and not having not even half a shame about, sharing something that really messed me up. But because I know this can help someone. I also thank Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous for getting me into that, position of like a position that embraces the mentality of service as an integral part of living with principles, that's the 12th step of service. So yeah, so there's that. A part of my spiritual journey there,
All right.
besides re-embracing the Catholicism, was going to the Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, embracing a spiritual program that acknowledges a higher power, not necessarily just this one, that one, so on and so forth. Eventually, it got me into my masonry, and once you get into masonry, you gotta be
What is
ready.
Mason? I never.
Masonry.
I've heard about it, but never really talked to anyone in it or really understand what it is. Please enlighten us and the
Well,
viewers.
I appreciate, the terminology you're using, but I'd have to like immediately pick at it because that word enlightenment, it's just like I respect it as, hey, offer us your spiritual, perspective. I can
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it defined like that, but I've seen it used in such ways. Like I've been in hippie communities, and it's like, oh, he says they say they're enlightened. They even say they're more enlightened than someone else. Right when I hear someone say they're more enlightened than someone else, well, what I understand from enlightenment is you share your light. You have found light. You have found the ability to find orientation in many different situations, emotional, logical, otherwise, on the energy path, the EN in the beginning of enlightenment. E
Mm-hmm.
can represent the middle path. You got two paths here, and then you got one in the middle, and also that square, or it could be considered a rectangle depending on what your perspectives of it are. But anyways, and then the end can be considered a line with an R that is flipped around and doesn't have the line on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it can be considered two R's, an R with a line segment. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of breakdowns to like what the symbolism is, and it's personal, and it relates to not only like your own feelings about it, but also like, mathematical freaking what do you call it? The way that they record certain like symbols in math, like the speed of light is the letter C. That
Mm-hmm.
represents the speed of light, right? Like a line segment, if it's a line, it's implied that it goes on forever in both directions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing with math, unless it's like, designated as being a line segment. So like when you go to the American language, American language was developed, well, I mean, I'll say this is very Mason related. That 5-pointed star has historically been recognized as a pagan star, right?
Really?
Yeah, yeah, you can check it out. Paganism, like animal deities, acknowledging human deities, acknowledging many different, spiritual contributors as far as like, what is a wisdom teacher and what is, an equal on this world, right? The 5-pointed star, well, our flag, American flag, like I was talking about the English language a second ago, American flag has, what is that? 50 pagan stars on it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of low key and not so low key references to masonry
Mm-hmm.
all throughout American society. I'm sure a lot of people that watch YouTube videos, they've seen ones where they're like in Washington D.C. and they're like, yeah, and the streets are designed just like, there's a freaking a pentacle, a 5-pointed star, which, just to put a little, because I know the devil haters start coming in, they're like, oh, they taught me that that's devil shit. I'm like, and fair enough that they taught you that. But guess what? There's other teachers that teach other things, and you might as well go get all the information you can, make a reasonable decision on it. Another thing that the 5-point star has represented is in Da Vinci, right? Some of their works, they have this picture is the Vitruvian man, right? It's a man doing like a jumping jack, and many have
Yeah.
like seen this, so you already know.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you know, that posture also represents the 5-pointed star as a
Really?
yeah. And from what I know, them stars, they represent the light of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because just to see one star living on this world is to know that, well, that if you've, experienced the open night sky, you see one star, it implies that there are many stars,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so these stars have different light orientations. There's different star sequences. You have white dwarfs, brown dwarfs. You got supernova, you got magnetars, many different types of light. You know what I'm saying? And it just goes back to that animist and also some of my earlier comments on like the Jain Taoist type philosophy that we hold these days, is that each life is a blessed light, has a spirit to it, has a soul too, and has a place that it can fit in evenness on this world. And I believe that that's a thing that happens on many worlds.
Beautiful way to put it.
Appreciate it. Just try to keep my truth solid and accessible. So I talk a lot. We
That's
talk a
good.
lot.
That's good.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
you get
now,
good at your craft doing it a bunch of times.
okay, but question: but how does this relate to transhumanism?
Okay. So transhumanism for me is like
Mm-hmm.
humans transitioning into different forms that aren't necessarily all new. Like you could transition to an ancient form. You could go and do spiritual exercises to go into ecstatic trance and commune with parts of your knowledge base and otherwise have your consciousness project itself and possibly communicate. I'll say possibly just, out of respect for whatever other spiritual paths are listening type thing, possibly communicate with other metaphysically entangled beings that exist in planes that aren't perceivable, I guess, unless you have, let's say, the structures to perceive them, the knowledge base to accept that they're there, and
Mm-hmm.
that's doing a thing. And oh, here's a bunch of reading that says what spirits do sometimes, and of course, just using your empathy, you might get to a place of, well, what would happen if a little disembodied spirit was just wandering around the earth, didn't have nowhere to go, didn't know what to do, was still sitting there going through all of the mistakes that they had made, had bound themselves to a non-bodily form, and were just floating looking for answers. There's lots of intuitive and research-based information that can help someone on that path of discerning, what the heck goes on out there. But anyways, it's about what do you call it? Communing with these spirits, and then I let myself get away from myself. Oh yeah, how it relates to transhumanism. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the ancient aspects of it, or one of the ancient paths, I guess, that relates to transhumanism. And then there's also paths forward as far as like, let's say, androidism, right? Cybernetic, like enhancement, right?
Yes.
Uh, it's other technological augmentation. Like even somebody with a hearing aid is technically a transhuman. Because now you have something more than just what you were born with as a human. You know what I'm saying? In
Hmm.
my perspective of what transhumanism means. So
All
yeah,
right. So if I'm understanding you correctly, transhumanism to you is it's more or less a state of a human being already transitioning or in the process of transitioning to a something that is different. Not necessarily something that is better or worse, but something different that is non-human,
uh,
beyond the level of human that they naturally are.
I'd say yeah, not necessarily better or worse. I'd say they're modifying themselves to become different for sure, and better or worse, that's highly subjective. Like there are blind people; they're completely happy being blind. Like they have found other meanings in their life. They have found books to read. They have found relationships to have. Some of them they don't all seek eye surgery. For example, right?
Hmm.
So I wouldn't call it better. I just call it different because each person's way, that's their way. That's a life on the way. Like what it takes for them to reach full, let's say, spiritual fruition, right? A place of like, anyways, even that's subjective. But let's just, for my example, I'd say like a philosophical access to any and all of any wisdom that would be appropriate for whichever situation. to become highly effective, to become efficient to the point that you ain't pressed by nothing. Anything is just a lesson or a blessing, and many times it's both simultaneously, depending on how far in the walk that you've gotten or whatever perspective that you've, assumed to be yours for the moment. So it's like,
Mhm.
I don't think it's better or worse. I think transhumanism is about modifying yourself, becoming, adding something on to what the original view of human was when you were born.
Mm.
It's
Is it?
personal, highly subjective.
Would you say it's more of a personal or as a group thing? Because you could make the argument that every child essentially goes through or is in the process of becoming a transhuman because they are learning spiritually, maturing physically more than they currently are. Or like a grown man who's finished growing mentally and physically, but through religion or through spiritual practices becomes something more.
Hmm.
So in
Yeah,
that sense, isn't transhumanism a very old thing and nothing new at all?
yeah. I agree. Well, I'll say this. I agree with like, yeah, the idea of transhumanism and what it presents as far as like, yeah, it's definitely. I could agree that it's an ancient thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I would also say that it's something that's changing with the days. And so the transhumanism of tomorrow may be very different from the transhumanism of, yesterday and 1,000 years ago, even, and especially in this age of Moore's curve, right? Which is when technology, it's that one graph that's like a U, but then like once it hits a certain level of technology improving upon itself, it just goes straight up, like singularity, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the references to like when technology just like there's mega advancements. One day there's an NVIDIA, computer video card, and then the next day you're able to put on a bracelet and instantly go into fully immersive AR reality. Like that type of advancement. That's where we're at as far as like on the technology curve. So it's like there'll be massive changes as far as what transhumanism was, and of course, transhumanism is like, and what it's going to be. Transhumanism is constantly being, added to, and supplemented and complemented, you know, and yeah, and of course, yeah, the ancient teachings are vital. And then I'm gonna go back to what you said a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I agree with what you presented, that there's like a collective growth process that goes on in spiritual communities, from when you're born to as you grow to be a man. One part that I did disagree with that you said was that you said when they stop learning, and I'll say I just don't think that anyone stops really learning, even if they don't want to. Even if you don't want to learn that table's there. Like, I really don't feel like learning the orientation of my house. Eventually, your body will stub the friggin' toe, or you'll stub your toe a bunch of times, and like, it teaches you. Like your body teaches you sometimes if the mind doesn't want to learn, for example, right? Uh, I mean, I feel like let's see, comes to that learning aspect. One thing that I have is when you stop learning, you start dying, and when I say dying, I don't mean like heading towards death. I mean rolling the chaos cube, right? Basically, instead of learning, through mindful effort, I'm going to learn through the teacher of pain, right? This is one of the teachers that's been the most vital, hella vital in my life, right? Pain's an old friend, and always taught me, hey, if you skate this way and if you bail this way, you're gonna get torn up. And if you can, like, as a physical example, and then if you talk to them this way, and you really wanted to go on a date, but you didn't even like listen to them, right? Like they ain't gonna like be think that you all would even talk. What, they just want to like be talked at, you know what I'm saying? Like, I felt bad about it afterwards, and I was like, fucking. I feel bad because like I give a shit about them. I want to be able to talk, in a way that they freaking, understand and that respects their time and that respects like whatever their willful expression and times of expression are, their timings and everything, like, like lingual conversation standards, and what do you call it? Not lingual conversation standards. That's a shit way to say it. Uh, but like cultural conversation standards, and like even gender conversation standards, even though the gender thing is more and more going into gray areas with that, but there's still those that like heavily identify with being feminine or masculine. And so like just adjusting to that, of like, oh, they would rather that I just listen. Like this one would rather that, like, I save their breath when they start going off on some stuff that they don't even really care about, because they're used to doing filler conversation and not having it be about meat potatoes. Like I'm more of a freaking brass tacks person. You know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like, presenting appropriately and calibrating myself to all these different interactions, like, and feeling pain afterwards, like, rolling the die, and being like, dude, I don't know how I'm going to make it out of this. As far as like, I don't know if we're going to, be friends or get married, or, you'll be my friggin' study partner, or I'll never talk to you again. But I know I can learn from it, because I'll think about these interactions. I'd be in pain about these interactions. I'd be going at myself about it because I wasn't settled with the outcome of that interaction so many times. So I rolled that dice. I don't think we stop learning. I think we just start gambling. And gamble long enough, you can learn something about, if nothing else, how you play. You know what I'm saying?
I get you. I get you. That was deep.
Or
But I will say this question: what do you think the direction most people are headed, and the direction you believe a person should head, or at the very least you want to head?
can you repeat the question for me?
What is the direction in terms of a transhuman transformation? A person becoming more than they currently are and transcending what it means for them to be human. Where do you think most people in our society are headed in that regards, and where do you think a person should be headed? Or and lastly, where do you personally want to head?
Okay. So as far as addressing majorities of people and making like a general statement about, what what the air feels like when the
Mhm.
masses start running with torches, where are they running towards? It's such a web of tangled personal interests. I really would rather deal with it on an individual basis, because I just don't like making inaccurate statements that imply that I, am a freaking computer-based intelligence that has all these data sets at my fingertips, and I'm able to make accurate representations of that type of stuff when it comes to where all the mass is heading question. All right, so uh, I'll say that there. There's many
Mhm.
different ways, many different paths, and it's personal as far as what they even think is the peak of achievement. Not even something that can be defined by the religion in many cases, or their spirituality, in many cases. But anyways, I will go to where they should be headed. I say where it
Mhm.
should be headed. I ain't the freaking authority. We're not. We're not the authority on this is the only way to ever do it, But we know some things about how to have, basically, how to approach utopia, as far as like on a personal level of satisfaction, but also like how my personal perspectives can be reflected out into society, as far as like, let's say, the very wealthy, right? And how
Mhm.
them embracing a certain spiritual path would offer friggin' countless improvements, like, utopia stuff. Everyone has enough to eat, right? Everybody, there's no water shortages anywhere. Like, there's always something that's available for them. I'll say, to get there, that ain't that far of a stretch. And I can just break it down like this. The only thing that's holding back that world from coming into existence, and although we are heading towards it, so it's, gradually being put together, is infrastructural allocation. Simple and plain. If there's transportation over here for them to get to wherever, there's education for them to learn whatever it is that, they're looking to learn, and they got the food scarcity problem done, the drastic amount of reduced the drastic reduce excuse me, the drastic reduction in violence, in like petty disputes, and also like major genocides and stuff, it's gone. Oh,
Hmm.
their foods are good. Like they're not hungry and making decisions based off an empty stomach. By someone that's offering them this, this, and this, but actually is, wanting them to go and fight, a war for them, or go. You know what I'm saying? Like go battle to keep their estate straight. Like politicians and whatnot that have basically poor rich boys dying in ditches because they ain't want to share. Is where I break it down to. Highly, incredibly wealthy individuals that like they've been impulse conditioned so much throughout their life that they're still seeking the next, shiny thing to feel good, want to be on camera, da da da. Do you understand that? Maybe you don't know. Who, a lot of people don't think about this. All the wealthy people on this world, like top whatever percent, right?
Hmm.
A handful of people, of families that are involved in corporations that lobby all of the politicians of the world, okay? Have their hands in the pocket, so on and so forth. They have
Hmm.
all the money just in the bank to be able to provide infrastructure for the entire world. As far as here's sewage systems, done. Now you're not getting sick from da 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 and having infant mortality rates that are taking out your babies and leading you to be more depressed. That then in turn leads to more crime in your communities as a result of not having good trauma processing skills because no one taught them. Because they only learn from their cultural guards and guardians and, wisdom teachers, but they don't always, one culture doesn't always have all the answers for the individuals in that culture. It's what do you say? They say it takes a village to raise a family, right? And if it's a world family, it takes a village, and it's a world village. That includes many cultures with intersecting, Pisces or, routes for that spirit to go and find directions for the river of life.
Hmm.
Cheesy as that sounds. Fern Gully reference.
Hmm.
So, as far as like, what they should do, you know, I really would only just look at the ones that, I mean, I say overall, I think that anyone would be happy, like super happy, embracing the Jainist, Taoistic philosophy of like, do no evil, don't hurt anything, right? Go out of your way not to cause pain to like, don't kill friggin' animals for friggin' no reason. Don't go act vengefully about this and that when you can learn how to be patient, when you can learn how to appreciate someone else was in a tough situation and you don't need to contribute to their, karmic spiral by going out and putting that same thing in the air, and adding that into the cultural amalgam scape. Right. You know, ideal it's basically, a peaceful type philosophy that, all, embraces the resources that we have available pretty much embraces, the knowledge that got a whole college in our pocket, right in our hand. You can go and take college courses, read science journals that are for PhD students, all this stuff, like utilizing the trail directions that we've been given and sharing them with as many people as you can, not holding back your wisdom teachings, not deciding like, hey, like I, I want them to do bad, or like, I feel like I'm doing better when they don't do good, or like, even on the business level, embracing that competition principle to the level of doing espionage on another company, sabotaging their work while they're working on cancer medicine, but this other company really wants to sell the cancer medicine, and for whatever reason, they've motivated somebody to go and fight for their workers. Might be one way they could frame that. Like that competition principle taken to the nth degree can lead to the type of treachery that holds back hundreds of thousands of millions of people and has them suffering in terrible ways. So sharing is right up there. The wave waves, like in the Mandalorian, they wave. Do you know what they wave? Like the Knuckles meme too. The wave. So yeah, freaking yeah. That's what I'd say about the them mass population thing, the shouldas, and my personal, just keep learning. maxing my productivity and my creativity and like sharing, much as I friggin' can. Go have experiences, go challenge the things that hold others back, and they act like they couldn't, do something, or they put themselves down because they've compared themselves to someone on a pedestal that only got there after, from directly like trying to get there. Like someone don't want to try to learn music because, oh, this person plays guitar so good, or oh, I don't want to learn how to sing because, oh, look at what the singers do. I don't want to learn how to dance because did you see those dudes on Just Dance? I don't dance like them. Like, like don't ever let a spotlight shoot you in the individuality, because you're more than a picture or a Facebook like. You're going to live with yourself your whole life and possibly die with yourself. Where you're going to die to, I don't know. But I ain't going to call that for you. But, of course, we have our own ideas about it, but I wish them the best that they have something in their deathbed besides counting their shoe collection or talking about who they beat at the last friggin', contest so that they can find something to stand on. I want them to find that within themselves, to have impressed themselves, to have found solidity and improving from the mistakes that they had made, to undoom themselves from the history that everybody takes a step in repeating when they go through life. We're cyclical beings that extract wisdom after witnessing sequences and then discerning patterns. And from there, translating that into something that turns into a little fortune cookie worth of this is what you could do, this is what you shouldn't do. And here's a great way to say it so you never forget it. Because you always be getting into that type of shit. You know what I'm saying? And trying to help them make fortune cookies.
Mm-hmm. So just to be just for you to spread some light on this, do you believe that us in our society, how we continually strive and compete with each other for greater and greater things, do you think that's a major problem for all of us in
So,
regards to us advancing?
so when it comes to that, there is a thing called competitive nature, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a it's an evolutionary mechanism, right? That is also gone into being a psychological mechanism, back with natural selection going on, well, only if you're faster are you going to, get some food at the river because there ain't that much, or, only if you're bigger are you going to be able to fight to get a mate in certain herds of animals, right? But now
Mm-hmm.
there's abundance of resources, right? So the competitive nature thing and the competitive competition mechanism, like there's a line now where it goes from this is what improves you doing competition, like being a good sport, like building social skills off of it and shit like that. And this is where you're holding back, yourself and other parts of humanity. Like, I'm going to sabotage someone in an Olympics race so that I can win, you know? Or I'm gonna friggin' I'm gonna steal someone's homework repeatedly in this small town and like put them through hell because I don't want them to leave this town because my whole family hasn't left this town and I'm not gonna leave this town because I ain't smart like them. Like that type of stuff. There's a solid line where that competitive nature can become just selfishness based off insecurity. And that's like, whoo, that's a killer. That shit goes all the way from the friggin' that is an affliction that goes all the way from the incredibly wealthy to individuals that are still trying to find a reason to love themselves when they look in the mirror before they go to their entry level McDonald's job. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that competitive principle is something to be clarified and read into and shit. Too much competition. That ain't competition. That's you feeling like you ain't good enough. I see what it is. The hell? Oh, and then I want to talk to them about that. Then it gets real specific. I do like therapy type stuff and like psychology type stuff and shaman type stuff with individuals that are looking to, have some spiritual clarification on a personal level sometimes. So that's a started going that way. Anyways, I'll end that response there.
Hmm. Okay. So essentially, it all comes down to A person not being willing to see or willing to humble themselves and to admit that maybe, just maybe, they aren't the sharpest tool in the shed. Is that what it comes down to? Them being unwilling to look in the mirror and just
So
admit their weaknesses.
yes, okay. When you said it there, I like that. Sharpest tool in the shed, it goes back to that, like, why am I comparing to everyone in the shed? You know what I mean? A hoe is good for aerating the soil, right? A rake is good for moving leaves around, right? That SAT test doesn't say, whether or not Arthur Fonzarelli was able to put his whole motorcycle back together with a blindfold, right? There's a dude from Happy Days, right?
Hmm.
Is right, like the metrics of intelligence aren't necessarily accurate on blanket levels, So I had to take down that saying right there real quick. I agree with the next thing you said. You're like, it's all about admitting the mistakes and humbling yourself to them. Straight the fuck up. 1,000%. That's exactly what it is. Fucking when I went after my pursuit of the Holy Spirit within me, right? After learning about it for so long, doing communion, you know, literally taking in and doing rituals to call the body of Christ into my body, like as we live and breathe, what has lived and breathed this air that we, currently inhale, right? The creators and the deities and these other prophets throughout history, all that breath goes somewhere. All those particles from its body go somewhere too. you know there's metaphysical entanglement that takes place on many levels, seen, unseen, released and unreleased to society, because they just, there's still a frontier of science where measurement tools just don't fully capture what we're seeing, because the more we improve our measurement tools, the more we're able to examine. So there's a bleeding edge of the unknown there. And in that area, spirit, heavens, the broken down bodies of many different prophets in the food that we eat, in the water that we drink, that have been dispersed over massive fields of, particle dispersion, which is something that happens every day. Every time you friggin' squeeze a Windex bottle, you got things that might end up on the other side of Africa with a breeze. Just take time. Well, there's been thousands, thousands and thousands of years. So, um, where was I going with that? I was answering something, or we were answering something. Pardon us.
No, you were responding to something I said about your statements on the competitive drive and competition.
Oh yeah. And then I got into the Holy Spirit. Yeah, that always takes me into like a very, passionate path.
Hmm.
When it comes to that, like, yeah, like for me, as a Catholic, as a Christian, as a raised Mason, right? And that's like a whole friggin' thing for me to like go and think about, like, no, I'm not going to settle for how I messed up. And there ain't nobody that can dad me up or brother me up like we can. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could hear it from someone else, but if I don't really take myself seriously down to the nth degree, down to like, what the hell, you know, but I have fucking gone through social inventories and like straight up writing out all the fucked up things that I've done and speaking them out to spirits, above and below, within, without, and beyond, right? And said, hey, like this is what it is. Until I felt all the way even with where I was standing, until I fully gave myself the shit that I deserved to get for the type of shit that I did. And like with all respects to the ones that I did it to and that it happened with, because I ain't here to drag everybody through my recovery process. You know what I'm saying? That's their own choice to get on that boat. So keeping it humble and like, yeah, never being too friggin' big for my britches when it comes to like, but I'm just another life, you know? The motherfucker says like you're this, you're that, but I ain't better than you. I'm different. You're different too. So we're the same there, you know? I'll pull someone out their distance real quick when it comes to shit like that. It just ain't how we think anymore.
That is true. It's true. Hmm. Personally, I'd say, as you know, and as I told my viewers, I'm a pretty ignorant guy. And I think that a big a big stone for me is Christ, that he is the way I should be and the way I should go to be more like him. And I want you to know, like, in this culture of us going away from religion, because I admit, when I first thought for an interview for transhumanism, I wasn't expecting someone as spiritually educated or learned as you, or as interested in it as you, to come on here. What would you have to say to people in the transhumanist community and in the wider society that seem to be moving away from religion in general? What would you say?
That's a personal choice. Uh, I would say all this wisdom that they wrote about and that they suffered over, it was all put out there to help you, you know, like take advantage of the freaking, of the knowledge and the wisdom and the information that's at your fingertips, like don't take it lightly when it comes down to how many hundreds of thousands died just so they could share the words from this book,
Pause.
like
Pause.
like some. Oh, you want me
Wait.
to pause? No problem.
Pause. I have to talk to someone real quick. I'll be back. Oh, all right. Sorry about that. Just had someone interrupt. You
Hey,
could
you're
go.
all good,
Go on.
dude. Life happens, and I respect that.
All right. All right. Go on. Go on.
When it comes to, yeah, dude, spiritual teachings are there for you. Like, you can go make your mistakes all the fuck you want. You'd be lucky to have someone stop you, and
Hmm.
and blessed be that they get to realize how lucky they are when someone steps in and says, "Dude, you're hurting yourself. I've hurt myself too. I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but I will share what I've been through. The shit means the world." And there are books. There are books where hundreds of thousands have died, have like been in struggle for generations, been born into war, have their children torn away from them, just so that they can go and share this wisdom. You know, I might not agree with all the things that those crusaders did, but the spirit of I want to share this faith with you. You choose. I like that. And every spiritual, uh, let's say, system has had teachers out there sharing their wisdom and knowledge. And they did it, and it hurt, and it took time, and it took walks. It took walks through their mind. It took walks through the world. It took that commodity that is an equal for all of us, time. You know, your time, you have time, I have time. Everyone, even these creatures, this bird out here chirping has time. These ants, they have time too. You know, it's a great equalizer when it can be seen as not like a store of value or something that's related only to, or directly to monetary value or, some other secondhand metric, that really is a step from the essence of time. It's there for you. And there's been blood, sweat, and tears put in, like you don't gotta go anyway. I ain't here to sell them spirituality, but I will say this. The brain is tremendous and has areas that are unexplored in certain levels of mental development, right? We have, dude, we got capabilities, dude. Like, there's, we got capabilities that are hidden within capabilities. We have capabilities that are hidden within knowledge, that are hidden there within, you know, the secrets that we keep from ourselves, even.
Yeah.
And there are gifts that have been given to each person, to help them find their way into appreciating the present that is the present. The gift that is I stand here, I breathe, I can offer something. I have purpose, I can create. you know we're all in the line of creators. you know whether those creators destroyed or not, even destroying something is creating something. A ruin, from ruin you can learn a lot. you know from ruins, from catastrophes and stuff like that in my life, I've learned so much. If I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't know the stuff I know now. Not like, not locked in to my left and right brain, not emotionally, neurochemically conditioned to be viewed as significant past a reading in a book that, was from, let's say, a teacher that didn't really know me. I had to go put the faith into works. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, like, it's there for them. A bunch of acts of faith that led to great works, that led to incredible peace and abundance and communicative capability, and, like, all those things that go with being an excellent negotiator, which life is full of negotiations. So, be a freaking compromiser without compromising yourself. That's one of my recommendations as far as little wisdom nuggets go. Yeah, you know, I would say, yeah, like don't forget, others they might have been living in different time periods, but just because their cartoon had a different setting, that doesn't mean that they didn't deal with similar stuff in many frames.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. That's a very good way to put it.
Nice.
Anyway, for a final question before we wrap up this interview, I'd like to ask you, for someone who wants to get into deeper spiritual reading, or for someone who wants to transcend what they currently are, what are some books you'd recommend? Or some spiritual teachers you'd recommend them look into? Then we'll end it off.
So that's like I've had people ask me this on different boards. And I'm like, dude, I'm getting into, communicating with ghosts, for example. Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm Christian and I'm interested in, looking into something, that relates to Christianity. Uh, on one board, I even posted, I'm looking for connections with Judaism and other religions, right? And I had someone go and do a real deep, what would you call it? A real deep post about like just an extensive post on like so many details of so many different cultures that have contributed to Judaism, right? And it's like without that background, I feel like I wouldn't give the most appropriate, I want to give the most like direct route for them. I don't want to just give a general, well, here's the books that I studied because I ain't them, and even the order that I studied the books in, that's personally relevant to, teachings that I was seeking out, so it's like, it's a personal thing. Why don't we do, what you can help me with? Because I want to answer your question. Uh,
Yeah.
for you, let's do it personal, like, if can you reword the question and make it about what would you recommend for me, and then I'll answer.
Okay, what would you just recommend for, say, the average Christian who just wants to get into something deeper? Just the average lay person.
Okay. The average Christian layperson. I would recommend Masonry. I recommend to go online, look up Freemasonry. There's a specific site that I've gone to with certain Freemasonry literature that's available, and you don't have to buy a book or nothing. But I read about the tabernacle in the wilderness, the
Mm-hmm.
texts that are related to that. Now that connects so many different faiths. You know, honors, of course, some of the main characters and individuals and spirits in Christianity, and also goes so far as to honor even some of the relatives of Jesus and Mary. And I'd say Boaz and Yakim, which is a father and a brother in those bloodlines. And I won't go into too much detail about which ones they are, but I'll just say, they're fathers and brothers in the line of Jesus and Mary, and a father and brother in the line of Jesus and Mary. And they're honored in that. And yeah, all the philosophy that's related to them and all that, it definitely goes with the Christian standards. And it took me friggin' way far. I didn't personally start just going looking for those texts. I went a darker path as far as like, not dark with intention. My intentions were light and to like, to show love and stuff. But I went straight for looking at the goetic demons and understanding, basically the demons of the Christian pantheon and the angels of the Christian pantheon, and looking into like, what are their specific teachings, like, I don't think the demons are fucking out here being mean and stuff like that, just like to be mean. They're freaking angels, they have everything, they have all of the wisdom and knowledge. They're born of God, like there's more to it, you know? And yeah, I'd recommend the masonry. And now I'm kind of deviating a bit, but I would say I started in Goetica when I was doing some research into further clarifying my position on being a Catholic and being born being having walked a large section of my life with that faith with me, and wanting to solidify it in other ways.
All right, all right, all right. Well, that's a lot to take in.
Word. I hear you. There's a lot to do too, man. It ain't nothing to take lightly, except for times that it's good to take it light. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Anyway, that's the end of this interview. I'd like to thank you, Trippy Trooper, for coming on here and allowing me to interview you and taking out your time for me. I know this was a big ask. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here.
Word. Respect.
Anyway, I suppose I'm a real YouTuber. Like and subscribe.
Hey, it goes with the occupation, huh?
Like and subscribe. Oh Lord. Next time, I may just have a Raid Shadow Legends ad. You never know. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and thank you, Trippy Trooper.
Mhm.
Goodbye.